Patrick Johnston is quite cross with me, Blake. We were pushing his hit all last week until we got to Friday, the day about nothing, the show about nothing. I said, don't worry, you're on Canucks Conversation. We'll catch up with you Monday. So this hit has been a long time in the making. He joins us now, the beat writer from the
I'm sure he missed us, yeah.
And Post Media. Well, even worse, I pushed his previous hit into March, which means he's got to wait another 30 days to invoice it. So he's some upset with me, and he's got good reason to.
Yeah.
How
As
are
I
you?
said before, Matt,
I apologize.
you only did this to yourself. The invoice part, you only did this to yourself.
I apologize. Thank you for being so flexible with
We
us.
wanted more things to talk about. And by giving you the weekend,
Exactly.
Demko's injury gave us more stuff to talk about.
There's nothing to talk about
Yeah.
Friday, as you can attest by sitting in with Quadrilli on Canucks Conversation. But let's just start there. Were you surprised they weren't able to get anything done?
I had thought they would add like a defenseman. And then when I saw Chad Ruedel become a New York Ranger, I'm like, all right, nothing's happening. I guess this is where we're at. Yeah, I was a little surprised. I think I had that feeling on Wednesday, talking to Jim Rutherford and just sort of getting a sense of, okay, what are they thinking around the edges that they're not they know where they're at. They know the price for a Gensel Gensel certainly was going to be big. Obviously seeing the Toffoli deal, a little surprised. Maybe they weren't able to find they don't have a ton of mid-tier prospects, but a mid-tier prospect that maybe makes it look a little better. So yeah, I'm a little surprised nothing at all happened.
So you thought they should have beat the price on Toffoli?
Well, I don't know if I certainly he would make this team a lot better, right? Like I think he adds a lot to this lineup.
Would you have given the 25 first round pick for Tyler Toffoli?
Well, given the argument, in the end, I do buy the case that Alvin made, which is why I asked him about Pettersson's signing, and he said, yeah, he joked about an 8-year window, but if you really think about it, and I wrote about this on Friday afternoon, Pettersson signing locks in what's clearly a minimum of 3-year window because that's how much longer Quinn Hughes' contract goes for. You know what your core is. So you don't have to make moves now just to make moves, right? The team's playing well. You got to feel comfortable with your team. I think they're right to feel comfortable with their team. That doesn't mean they won't go forward. They have decisions. They've got a mountain of free agents to deal with this summer. So in the end, I go back and forth because they couldn't exactly match what Winnipeg did, right? Like they could do next year's second, but they don't really have a third. They have a third. You offer the Devils the other half of that conditional pick. You're going to have to add something else. So they don't and maybe in the end the Devils just weren't interested. Maybe it was there. Maybe they did say, I don't know. I haven't really done any sniffing around on that. But that to me would have been what the question was. Are we willing to give up Kirill Kudryavtsev? Like I don't know even who would qualify.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of, like I said, I get it. Like it is that challenge of all these guys. If you want to keep Hronek, if you want to keep Zadorov, there's other decisions they're going to have to make. I know others have mentioned this before, but you're going to have to think long and hard about Brock Besser, and how you're aligning your money up and where it's all going to go.
You mentioned defensemen off the top without adding a defenseman. It means that if the Canucks go on a 2 to 3, certainly 3 round run in the playoffs or beyond, because we've seen the playoffs, it means we'll see Mark Friedman in the playoffs. Like that. That's just what this means.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
He's been all right. I haven't had moments going, oh man, Friedman's in the lineup, but certainly the zip is, there's as you would
sizzle.
expect. Yeah, there's less sizzle. You get down to 8, 9. Matt Irwin's been up a couple times. I suppose we'll see Matt Irwin. Maybe we'll see Christian Wolanin somehow. Jet Wu maybe. But yeah, the barrel is pretty
scraped.
Scraped. Thank you. Gosh, I dug in this metaphor that I knew was going nowhere. Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty scraped. So
it's a pretty good barrel, though. I mean, like
it's not bad.
It's a nice oak, sturdy.
The barrel's nice. Yes, absolutely.
Smells nice. Well constructed.
Nice,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Good
From the-
strapping.
From
good
the
barrel
Highlands,
strapping.
from the Highlands of Scotland. No, it's a decent barrel. Tucker Poolman was once in that barrel.
Yep.
And you wrote about how he's the one screwing everything up right now, or his contract is the one screwing it all up. Patrick, explain.
Well, Farhan turned to me at some point. We were talking about this, and he goes, "So let's think about this. You know, they came in, the cap was a mess. 2 years later, what's still there?" And I said, "Well, technically Myers, because obviously the player has been playing well, but the price point is for a different player. Um, but other than that, they've kind of uncorked the rest of that. So the last thing left is that Poolman deal, which in the end you would like him to be playing. He started the beginning of the last season in the lineup, and while we were in that press conference on Friday, Alvin kept talking about LTI, 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 and the only reason they're now in LTI that they can't actually accrue any space is because they have this Tucker Poolman deal that just sits there and moves up and down depending on who's in the lineup, but is consistently over the cap and using the LTI cap exemption. And so I literally had the moment in my head. I sat there and, they do the pass the mic around thing, and I'd done my questions and it kind of came up. I had the mic in my hand and I blanked and I couldn't remember what the heck I was going to ask, and so I handed it back and we were walking out. I was walking with the quads. We were coming back to the studio and it all of a sudden hit me. So I texted Alvin. He's not a big texter, but you never know. I said, "Listen, would you entertain a question based on something you said that I meant to ask with blank?" He said, "What's the question?" And I said, have you explored trading Poolman?" And he went, "Yes." Because you can get it. Like, you take that off the books and all of a sudden they're $1 million under the cap today, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Like, that's a lot of money they could be accruing. All of a sudden they are using the cap to their advantage.
Well, the accruing part is huge for people to understand here, that every passing day, the cap space gets theoretically bigger, and you can't do that in LTIR.
It's a year-long budget, and if you spend less than your daily budget, that money, you can use it later. This is how the system works. I know people yell and scream about LTI and teams taking advantage of it, but you know what? Like, you should be using every avenue in front of you. One of them is simply not being at the cap, and a lot of teams haven't done that. But if the Canucks did find their way out of this, and I can see perhaps in the end why there are other teams that do not want to dance with them, because they can see the material advantage it would bring the Canucks to do so. You can get it. I mean, the Arizona as dumping ground. I mean, there is that theory out there that Arizona simply exists to deal with other people's cap problems. But if I don't know, I haven't gone and looked into it. I'm not sure he would be, based on how I understand the NHL's insurance policy works. But conceivably, he could have an insured that contract could be insured, and then nobody's, this insurance company's paying for it. But
they've only got one retained contract right now. The Coyotes, they've got 2 slots available.
Yeah, but they dumped. I mean, in the end, what did they do on Friday? They just got rid of cash. That's all they care about, right? Like, it's an absolute joke of a team. The owner is. Who knows if the owner has the money, right? Like, they dumped contracts. It was all cash. They traded Troy Stetcher, didn't retain anything. They traded Matt Dumba, didn't retain anything. They got rid of all these raw salary contracts.
But what's your understanding of trading Poolman? Do you actually have to pay Poolman, or is it all on insurance anyway? Like,
well, that's what I'm asking. So from how I understand, I haven't asked, but from what I understand how the insurance policy works is that there's a not unreasonable chance that Poolman's contract isn't insured, because you can't insure every contract. Essentially what happens is your top players get insured, and then there's usually a few others you can ask about, and the insurer may go for it, but sometimes the insurer said no. And I don't know if they were, insurer at this point will turn around and say, we'll give you a policy on that. They couldn't get one on Michael Furlan, for instance. Like, they did ask, and the insurer said no.
Hey, good news with the Coyotes. There's the first NHL team selling their own streaming service. They debuted this a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure it is not just a last-minute cash grab by the owners to take your money on their way out the door.
Both subscribers say it is a great product.
Exactly. 2 subscribers agree. Thumbs up.
4 out of the 5.
Can I ask this follow-up by way of I'm not disagreeing with you on Poolman, but I'm giving you another perspective to consider.
Sure.
As much as him being an LTR and keeping the Canucks in LTIR is not ideal, would it matter if Ilya Mikheyev was playing better hockey, or if Ilya Mikheyev in his 4.25 was at least tradable?
Absolutely. Now, I think get a mild pass because no one anticipates blowing out your knee in the beginning of the first year of your contract. But yeah, if Ilya Mikheyev, I mean, I think I said this to Jeff the other day. How did he score 10 goals? I mean, I will say, I think he's been a lot better the last week. He's been around the net, but at some point, and I think Tocchet said it himself, at some point the puck's just going to hit him in the chest and go in the net. But he's been playing better, but he's paid to score, and he hasn't scored in 3 games, or what is it? I don't.
It feels like his
Nearly a
stick,
half season.
It feels like his stick blade is only about 1.5 inches tall, so that like he can stick handle, but it jumps off his stick as readily. Like there's just nothing there.
Yeah, the wheels. There were moments. I'm starting to see bursts here and there, but there's not the straight ahead. Straight line speed that he showed that was like faster than Connor McDavid at one point.
Yeah.
Do you
haven't seen that?
Did you identify any buyer's remorse from Allvin on Friday? And do you think he would rather have Gensel and Tanev as opposed to Zadorov and Lindholm?
I mean, I think they still like Zadorov a lot. The price they got, they paid for Zadorov was next to nothing. So, even if he's not a perfect player, they're pretty happy with what he's been, certainly when he's been good. The Lindholm
quite a performance on After Hours. I learned a lot.
Yeah,
about Zadorov this past Saturday.
Big personality, and yeah, when he's playing in that role, I think he's. Yeah, the Gensel, did Lindholm, cost you Gensel? I mean, you look. I thought JD Burke laid it out well. Here's the alternative package, and you're probably giving up a fair bit for a player you're not sure you're going to be able to re-sign. And Gensel would have added a lot. Like, there's just absolutely no doubt. And you can tell that Allvin wished he lived in a different world where he'd been able to add him. There's absolutely no doubt about that. I mean, Lindholm, I thought was great on Saturday. That excuse me, that line with Podkolzin and Garland, like, there's something there. That's part of the story. Kenny Weeb was here from the Winnipeg Free Press, and he asked me after the game, he says, "That really how they play defensively?" I'm like, this is what they've been building towards. And having a spine of centers that they now have. I mean, obviously they traded for Lindholm to play with Pettersson. They thought that would be a thing, but now they're in a different world, which is perfectly fine. I think the lineup as constructed is pretty great. Absolutely. Would you like to have someone other than Ilya Mikheyev playing with Miller and Besser? Yes, absolutely. But I just don't know. The Gensel price was a challenge for this team. They have to be, when you have a 3-year window and you don't know if the guy's going to resign, you don't know if you can afford them. That's where sometimes you do want to stand still. My business buddy said, I thought the Canucks actually did the right thing. They stood still. Sometimes you have to just be quiet, and the bear won't smell you. The bear won't hear you, right? Like you don't have to do things just because other people are doing things. And there are undoubtedly going to be moves they can make coming. Now, if they don't do anything as an alternative, they bring in a player that, you're not finding a Gensel equivalent, but a player that does things that helps make your lineup better with the picks or the prospects you might have moved for Gensel, and you're able to keep that player, and it is better for your cap. Then we'll be talking a different story, but they've got to do that first.
Before we leave Lindholm, who's been underwhelming offensively, does a lot of the little things that a coach wants.
Yeah.
Is he, first of all, did the Canucks ruin the relationship with the Rumors? Or did somebody ruin the relationship for the Canucks with the Rumors? And secondarily, might all this play into the Canucks' hands that if they haven't had a sullied relationship with the possible trade to Boston, might Lindholm be not cheap, but pretty affordable in the offseason if they wanted to bring him back as a third-line center?
Yeah, the thought occurred to me that, I think he's going to go to free agency and see what's out there.
Sure.
The Canucks' task, obviously, now from here until whenever their season ends, is to show them what life is like here. And that is something that struck me when I talked to Rutherford, and he mentioned this to a few people. That was clearly a talking point they had. Was, listen, the guy's barely been here. Now they're home. His fiance and his young daughter are now here, or wife are now here. Like, his family's here. They get to see what living here is like. And that's certainly a thing that matters to players. That living in Vancouver is an enticing thing for the Canucks as a recruitment tool. So you probably know what you'd like to pay him in your heart of hearts, and what he probably wants to get.
But he's not going to be the belle of the ball at this rate, right?
No, I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so. But
his market is very stable, and very few.
Yeah.
Even a struggle for the rest of the year is not necessarily going to hurt it all that much, because top two centers are just almost never available in unrestricted free agency.
Yeah, he had 64 points last year. Like, he's having a difficult season here, but he had 64 points last year, and he didn't have either of those guys playing with him anymore. Like he has had a consistent, before this season, a really strong 5 years. Like, that doesn't disappear. It's not a guarantee he'll have another 5 years like that, but the last 5 years have been pretty good.
But he did a 20-point drop. He did a 20-point drop, and it could be another 20-point drop, or 10 to 12-point drop at the very least.
The outlier is the 82-point season, absolutely, right? But you look at that player, like there's a 42 and 56 in the COVID season, 54 in the 70 in the season before the pandemic. Like, he's a guy that's in that 55 to 65 point range. Like, that's a pretty good. That's a second line center, right? Like, that's a pretty good player. Even this year, like you said, he's on 39 points. There's I've lost track, 16, 17 games to go.
16, yeah.
10 more points, that still gets him to 50. Like, that's under roughly where he's been, but that's still and that's playing, on a not very good Flames team, and then playing right now third line minutes in Vancouver.
As long as he gets those 10 points.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. You're right. But that plays to your point. If he doesn't, then people are going to be like, I'm not so sure about this. He might not be looking at that long-term deal.
All right, let's get to Thatcher Demko. Have they ask you the Tim Hortons poll question? Have the Canucks leaned on Thatcher Demko too much this season?
Well, the thing that was interesting, I wanted to sit back and think about this, because we talked about Casey DeSmith. The one I wanted to think about was the last month, last 6 weeks, which has been difficult, since the All-Star game. Before his relief appearance on Saturday, Casey DeSmith had played 3 times since the All-Star break, which to me is too much Demko lately. I don't think on the season as a whole they leaned on him too heavy. There were, DeSmith, especially early, was getting a lot of game time. I would argue that, yes, they leaned on Demko too much, given the rate of the last month, which is, if this truly isn't a groin injury, as is being suggested, and it's something else, and it's not a big deal, we'll see. This is the blessing in disguise. Like, it was clear they needed to find a way to play him less, because what would you rather have? Him playing his 60th game of the year in game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals, or game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs, or game 60 with 3 weeks to go, right? Like, it's just that simple. And now they're going to be forced to rest him. And I think this is it's not the way you want to do it, but it is going to be great benefit for this team.
Follow-up question. Do you feel well about them keeping first place in the division and conference with a combination of Casey DeSmith and Artur Silas, Nikita Tolopilo, whomever it may be, over a brief period?
I mean, I was taken by Jeff's point. I think it was yesterday they tweeted out, the Canucks go 500 and they basically win the division, because Edmonton has to go with 16-4 or something. It's Edmonton's been playing really well. Don't get me wrong, but they also lost to Columbus and Buffalo the other day, right? Like that winning that is a huge percentage of games to win, no matter who you are. So the Canucks go 500. And there's a lot of reasons, no matter who the goalie is, that they'll go because of how they're playing. I think they're going to be fine. In the
might
long
put to
run,
rest the conference championship, though, which, second wild card might be handy.
Yeah, that's difficult. And that was always going to be difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that. But obviously there are incentives to finish first, because you'll get the weaker of the 2 wild cards. But at the end of the day, if the question is, are they going to be okay down the stretch? And yes, I think they will be. As for the goalie, I mean, Nikita Tolopilo, I'm pretty sure has surpassed Archer Silovs on sort of the long view depth chart. At the moment, Silovs has played 5 NHL games, right? Or 6 NHL games. And he was fine. He was fine last year. So I think they'll be comfortable bringing him up. He hasn't had a great year in Abbotsford. Tolopilo is the bigger story. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they brought Tolopilo up, but it just seems strange given that DeSmith is going to play the bulk of the games. Maybe Tolopilo gets a start. Maybe they do what they did last year. I mean, if you remember, they swapped out Silovs for Colin Delia at one point and just said, let's see what this kid's got. Maybe we're going to see that time. There are some matchups coming that you can spot a start in there.
Well, there's also some stakes this year that there weren't last year. So, lastly, Carson Soucy, 19-3-2 with him in the lineup, and they're trying him on the right side now. Finally, we're seeing the lefty on the right side concoction that really, to get your best 6 in the playoffs, has to be a thing.
Yeah,
right.
No, he's been it's an amazing story. I asked him after the game on Saturday, "Are you truly the secret weapon?" And he smiled, laughed, and he knows, absolutely knows the stat. He said, "I don't want to talk about the stats. I want to talk about my team." And to his credit, yeah. And then unfortunately, Rick Tucker didn't really understand my question. I didn't really have a chance to follow up. I didn't worry about it too much. But I said, "What does he bring?" But he has been so steady when he comes in, and we see it. Like I wrote about it in preseason. Everyone kind of talked about it. His ability to use his reach is a demonstration for all tall defensemen on learn how to do that, because that is a skill that most players don't have. If you can get your stick on the other guy on the puck, that makes things a lot harder, because they're further away, and further away from their sort of danger zone. And when you're carrying the puck, you think you have more space, more time. He gets his stick out on that puck, and all of a sudden you're having to make decisions in a spot you didn't think, and you would have to. And that's clearly his advantage. I think that he has been so influential in that standpoint.
Puck on his stick, though, he's a good decision maker. I would say he's smarter than I gave him credit for.
Well, that was some of the knocks on him, that like he had trouble exiting the zone, clearing the zone.
Yeah, I've been blown away at how good he's been with the puck. Like he was a defenseman I certainly was very aware of, because he played in Minnesota and then played in Seattle, and you knew he was a pain in the ass to play against. Like, big, tough, strong guy, made things hard. But the way he's moved the puck has been absolutely fantastic. To the point where he kind of gets these very small, very soft seconds, to be honest, on the power play. But he's that third option right now on the power play if they need someone else. If they, like when they had the 5-on-3 the other night and Hronek got bumped up to the 5-on-3, Soucy was going to come out and run PP2. So yeah, the guy's having a great season. You just cross your fingers and hope he doesn't get hurt again.
Magnificent stuff.
Always.
Good thing we waited. Good thing
we
waited.
Good start to the week, boys.
It's worth the wait.
He's like Matt Damon on Jimmy Kimmel, right?
I'm trying to avoid that scenario. Did you see the Oscars ended with that dog peeing on his star last night?
Oh,
that was the final frame of the Oscars last night. Thanks, Matt Damon. We'll catch him next week.
Take care.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.